Before the first alphabet, before the first empire, the day began with mud. In the flat land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, men and women stepped into the riverbanks at dawn, cutting channels with simple tools, guiding water into fields that weren't supposed to grow anything. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke from cooking fires, and in the distance, a low temple tower watched over a city that had no right to exist yet. Quick question before we go on. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. For tens of thousands of years, humans moved with the seasons, following herds and living off what nature offered. But here, in Mesopotamia, someone made a different decision. Stay. Build walls. Dig canals. Store grain. Count it. Guard it. And once you start counting what you own, you need records, because memory isn't enough when a city is born. So they pressed their numbers and names into wet clay and left them behind, not knowing those marks would be found again thousands of years later. What makes this journey particularly fascinating is how much we've learned about these ancient people in just the past 2 centuries. Buried beneath millennia of sand and soil, their cities waited patiently for archaeologists to uncover their secrets. The tablets they left behind, covered in wedge-shaped markings, held silent for thousands of years before scholars finally cracked their code. When they did, an entire world came flooding back to life. The Sumerians, as we've come to call them, weren't just the first to build cities. They were the first to face almost every challenge that complex societies encounter. How do you organize thousands of people living in close proximity? How do you distribute resources fairly? How do you resolve disputes without constant violence? How do you preserve knowledge across generations? How do you coordinate large-scale projects that require the efforts of hundreds or thousands of individuals? These questions might sound familiar because we're still grappling with them today. The solutions the Sumerians developed became the blueprint for every civilization that followed. Their innovations in agriculture, writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, and governance spread throughout the ancient world, creating ripples that reached far beyond their original homeland. But tonight, we're not just exploring their achievements. We're diving deep into their daily lives, their beliefs, their struggles, and their triumphs. We'll walk through their bustling marketplaces, observe their religious ceremonies, witness their political dramas, and understand how they made sense of their place in the cosmos. We'll see how they dealt with floods and droughts, wars and peace, prosperity and hardship. The landscape that cradled this first civilization was both blessing and curse. The rivers that made agriculture possible also brought devastating floods. The flat terrain that allowed easy communication and trade also left communities vulnerable to invasion. The rich soil that supported large populations also attracted the attention of neighboring peoples who wanted to claim it for themselves. In this challenging environment, the Sumerians developed something unprecedented in human history: urban civilization. Their cities were marvels of organization and engineering, featuring massive temple complexes, sophisticated drainage systems, and elaborate administrative buildings. These weren't just larger versions of earlier settlements. They represented a fundamentally new way of organizing human society. The temple dominated each Sumerian city, not just architecturally but socially and economically as well. These weren't merely places of worship, but complex institutions that served as banks, schools, workshops, and administrative centers. The priests who ran them weren't just religious figures, but skilled managers who coordinated the economic life of entire communities. Around these temples grew neighborhoods where craftsmen specialized in pottery, metalworking, textile production, and dozens of other trades. For the first time in human history, not everyone needed to focus on food production. This specialization allowed for innovations that would have been impossible in smaller, simpler societies. The development of writing emerged from the practical needs of these complex urban centers. When you're managing the resources of thousands of people, keeping track of grain stores, livestock, and trade agreements, human memory simply isn't sufficient. The Sumerians began by making simple marks on clay tablets to record transactions. Over time, these marks evolved into a sophisticated writing system that could capture not just numbers and names, but abstract ideas, stories, and laws. This invention changed everything. For the first time, knowledge could be preserved exactly as it was originally conceived. Laws could be written down and applied consistently. Stories and religious texts could be transmitted without the gradual changes that occur in oral traditions. Administrative records could track complex transactions across years or decades. The mathematical systems the Sumerians developed were equally revolutionary. Their base 60 number system gave us the 60-minute hour and the 360-degree circle. Their geometric knowledge enabled the construction of massive buildings that have survived for millennia. Their astronomical observations laid the groundwork for the calendar systems that still govern our lives today. But perhaps most importantly, they developed the concept of law as something separate from the arbitrary will of rulers. Their legal codes, written on stone tablets, established the principle that justice should be predictable and consistent. These weren't just rules imposed by force, but carefully reasoned systems that balanced individual rights with community needs. The political structures they created were equally innovative. Rather than simple tribal hierarchies, Sumerian cities developed complex governmental systems with specialized roles and checks on absolute power. Kings ruled, but they were advised by councils and constrained by religious traditions. Priests maintained significant independence, and merchants formed their own organizations to protect their interests. These political innovations emerged from necessity. When thousands of people live together in close proximity, informal social controls break down. You can't rely on personal relationships and family ties to maintain order. You need formal institutions, written laws, and professional administrators. The Sumerians were the first people in history to face this challenge, and their solutions became the foundation for every subsequent civilization. Their religious beliefs reflected their urban environment. Unlike earlier hunter-gatherer societies that saw the divine in natural phenomena, the Sumerians conceived of their gods as cosmic rulers who governed the universe much like earthly kings govern cities. These deities had specialized roles, complex relationships, and bureaucratic hierarchies that mirrored human institutions. The epic literature they produced explored themes that remain relevant today: the meaning of friendship, the inevitability of death, the proper relationship between humans and the divine, and the responsibilities that come with power. The Epic of Gilgamesh, their greatest literary achievement, grapples with questions about mortality and meaning that humans have been asking ever since. Their technological innovations transformed not just their own society, but the entire ancient world. The wheel, which they probably invented, revolutionized transportation and pottery making. Their metallurgical techniques produced tools and weapons that were far superior to anything previously available. Their architectural methods enabled the construction of buildings on a scale never before attempted. The irrigation systems they developed turned arid landscapes into productive farmland, supporting population densities that would have been impossible with rainfall agriculture alone. These massive engineering projects required unprecedented levels of cooperation and planning, creating the organizational skills that made all their other achievements possible. Trade networks that connected their cities spread Sumerian innovations across vast distances. Their merchants traveled as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia, carrying not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. The writing systems, mathematical concepts, and governmental structures they developed influenced societies throughout the ancient Near East and beyond. Yet for all their achievements, the Sumerians faced constant challenges. The same rivers that enabled their civilization also brought periodic devastating floods. Climate changes could turn fertile fields into barren wasteland. Political divisions between cities led to destructive wars that weakened all participants. External pressures from nomadic peoples required constant vigilance and military preparation. The story of how they met these challenges, adapted to changing circumstances, and ultimately influenced every subsequent civilization is one of humanity's greatest adventures. It's a story of innovation and tradition, cooperation and conflict, triumph and tragedy. Most importantly, it's a story that helps us understand how we became who we are today. As we begin this journey together, remember that these weren't mythical figures or abstract historical forces. They were real people facing real problems, making decisions that seemed reasonable at the time, but had consequences they couldn't have imagined. Their successes and failures, their wisdom and mistakes, their hopes and fears shaped the world we've inherited. Tonight, as sleep carries you deeper into rest, let your mind wander through their ancient cities, witness their daily struggles and celebrations, and marvel at their extraordinary creativity. The civilization they built lasted for over 3,000 years, longer than any society since. Their legacy lives on in every law we follow, every word we write, every calculation we make, and every city we call home. The morning sun cast long shadows across the temple courtyard as priests emerged to begin their daily rituals. In the pre-dawn darkness, bakers had already started their ovens, filling the narrow streets with the aroma of fresh bread. Merchants prepared their stalls, while farmers from surrounding villages loaded their donkeys with produce for the city markets. This was daily life in ancient Sumer, a rhythm of activity that had repeated for countless generations. The social fabric of these early cities was far more complex than anything humanity had previously experienced. At the top of the hierarchy stood the king, chosen by the gods and responsible for maintaining order between the earthly and divine realms. Below him, a carefully structured society included priests who managed the temples, nobles who oversaw large estates, merchants who facilitated trade, craftsmen who produced specialized goods, farmers who worked the land, and slaves who performed the most laborious tasks. Yet this hierarchy wasn't rigid or unchanging. Successful merchants could accumulate wealth that rivaled the nobility. Skilled craftsmen could earn respect that transcended their birth status. Even slaves could sometimes purchase their freedom or rise to positions of responsibility within temple or palace administrations. Social mobility existed in ways that would have been impossible in smaller, simpler societies. The role of women in Sumerian society was particularly notable for its complexity. Unlike many later civilizations, Sumerian women could own property, engage in business, and serve as priestesses in important religious ceremonies. Some women became powerful figures in their own right, managing large estates or conducting international trade. The goddess Inanna held a position of supreme importance in the pantheon, reflecting the significant role women played in both divine and earthly affairs. Family structures adapted to urban living in fascinating ways. Extended families often lived in compounds that included multiple generations and related households. Children learned trades not just from their parents, but from specialized masters who took apprentices. Marriage became as much an economic alliance between families as a personal relationship between individuals. The educational systems that emerged were revolutionary for their time. Temple schools taught young scribes not only the complex art of cuneiform writing, but also mathematics, astronomy, literature, and law. These institutions created a literate class that could manage the increasingly complex administrative needs of urban civilization. Knowledge became a specialized profession rather than something passed down informally within families. Religious life permeated every aspect of Sumerian existence in ways that modern people might find difficult to comprehend. The gods weren't distant figures to be worshipped on special occasions, but active participants in daily affairs. Every craft had its patron deity, every natural phenomenon reflected divine will, and every major decision required consultation with religious authorities. The temple complexes that dominated each city were like small cities themselves. The ziggurat, a massive stepped tower that rose toward the heavens, served as the gods' earthly residence. Around it clustered workshops where artisans created beautiful objects for religious ceremonies, schools where scribes learned their craft, storehouses where tribute and offerings were kept, and administrative offices where priests managed vast economic enterprises. These religious institutions weren't separate from economic life but central to it. Temples owned large tracts of agricultural land, employed hundreds of workers, and conducted extensive trade with distant regions. They served as banks, lending grain and silver to merchants and farmers. They operated like sophisticated corporations, maintaining detailed records of all their transactions and investments. The festivals that marked the religious calendar were spectacular community events that brought together people from all social levels. During these celebrations, the normal hierarchy was temporarily suspended as everyone participated in processions, feasts, and ritual dramas that reenacted mythological stories. These festivals served not just religious purposes, but crucial social functions, reinforcing community bonds and shared cultural values. The development of specialized crafts reached extraordinary levels of sophistication. Sumerian metalworkers created intricate jewelry using techniques that wouldn't be surpassed for centuries. Their pottery featured designs of stunning beauty and remarkable technical precision. Textile workers produced fabrics so fine that they were treasured throughout the ancient world. Woodworkers crafted furniture and musical instruments that demonstrated both artistic vision and technical mastery. The musical traditions that emerged from these urban centers were equally impressive. Sumerian musicians played harps, lyres, drums, and wind instruments in complex compositions that accompanied religious ceremonies and secular entertainment. Music became a specialized art form, with its own professional practitioners and sophisticated theoretical framework. The hymns and songs they composed influenced musical traditions throughout the ancient Near East. Legal systems evolved to handle the complex disputes that arose in densely populated urban environments. The famous Code of Hammurabi, though from a later period, built upon Sumerian legal traditions that established principles of justice, compensation, and punishment that seem remarkably modern in their sophistication. These laws addressed everything from business contracts and property rights to family relationships and criminal behavior. The concept of individual responsibility before the law was a revolutionary development. In smaller societies, conflicts were typically resolved through family or clan relationships. But in cities where strangers lived side by side, formal legal procedures became necessary. Courts with professional judges replaced informal mediation by tribal elders. Written contracts replaced verbal agreements based on personal trust. Trade networks that originated in Sumerian cities created the world's first global economy. Merchants traveled incredible distances to obtain exotic goods that couldn't be produced locally. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar wood from Lebanon, copper from Cyprus, and silver from Anatolia flowed into Sumerian markets. In return, Sumerian products, technologies, and ideas spread throughout the known world. These trade relationships required innovations in transportation, communication, and finance that seem remarkably sophisticated. Merchants developed standardized weights and measures that facilitated fair exchange across cultural boundaries. They created credit systems that allowed long-distance transactions without the physical transport of precious metals. They established trading posts and diplomatic relationships that protected their commercial interests in foreign lands. The astronomical knowledge developed by Sumerian priest-scientists was extraordinary for its precision and scope. They tracked the movements of planets with mathematical accuracy, predicted eclipses with remarkable reliability, and created calendar systems that balanced lunar and solar cycles. Their observations provided the foundation for astrological systems that influenced human thought for thousands of years. Mathematical concepts that we take for granted today were first worked out by Sumerian scholars. They developed positional notation, understood the concept of zero, and created geometric principles that enabled sophisticated architectural and engineering projects. Their mathematical texts show that they could solve complex problems involving algebra, geometry, and even basic calculus. The engineering achievements that resulted from this mathematical knowledge were breathtaking in their scale and sophistication. Irrigation canals that stretched for hundreds of miles turned deserts into gardens. City walls that rose dozens of feet into the air protected populations numbering in the tens of thousands. Harbour facilities that could accommodate large trading vessels connected inland cities to maritime commerce. Agricultural techniques reached levels of productivity that wouldn't be matched in many regions until the modern era. Careful crop rotation maintained soil fertility across generations. Selective breeding improved both plant and animal varieties. Storage and preservation methods enabled cities to survive years of poor harvests. The agricultural surplus that resulted from these innovations freed large portions of the population to pursue non-agricultural activities. The literary achievements of Sumerian civilization established narrative traditions that continue to influence storytelling today. Epic poems explored universal themes of heroism, friendship, love, and loss through characters whose struggles resonate across the millennia. Creation myths explain the origins of the world and humanity's place within it through stories of remarkable psychological sophistication. The preservation of these literary works required not just writing systems, but institutional commitment to maintaining cultural memory. Temple libraries carefully copied and recopied important texts across generations. Schools used classic literature as teaching materials, ensuring that cultural knowledge was transmitted to new generations. The result was an unbroken tradition of learning that lasted for thousands of years. Diplomatic relationships between Sumerian cities and neighboring peoples required sophisticated understanding of international law and custom. Treaties established boundaries, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Diplomatic marriages created alliances between ruling families. Exchange of gifts and tribute maintained peaceful relationships across cultural boundaries. Military innovations kept pace with other technological developments. Professional soldiers replaced tribal warriors as the primary defenders of urban centers. Specialized weapons and armor gave trained armies advantages over less organized forces. Fortification techniques created defensive systems that could withstand prolonged sieges. Military engineering enabled armies to conduct campaigns far from their home bases. The administrative systems that managed these complex societies were marvels of organizational efficiency. Bureaucratic hierarchies with clearly defined roles and responsibilities ensured that governmental functions continued regardless of changes in leadership. Record-keeping systems tracked everything from tax collection and military service to judicial decisions and diplomatic correspondence. Professional administrators developed expertise in specific areas of governance. Governance. The sophisticated census systems developed by Sumerian administrators represented humanity's first systematic attempt to understand population dynamics and resource distribution. Teams of scribes would travel throughout a city's territory, carefully recording the number of inhabitants, their occupations, their property holdings, and their family relationships. These records weren't merely statistical exercises, but practical tools for taxation, military conscription, and labor organization that required unprecedented levels of bureaucratic coordination. The standardization of measurements across different cities created the foundation for reliable commercial relationships and architectural projects. A cubit measured in one Sumerian city needed to equal a cubit measured in another, hundreds of miles away. Weight standards for precious metals had to remain consistent across vast trading networks. Volume measurements for grain and oil required precision that enabled fair exchange between strangers who might never meet again. Medical knowledge advanced rapidly in urban environments where large populations provided opportunities for systematic observation of diseases and treatments. Sumerian physicians developed surgical techniques, pharmaceutical preparations, and diagnostic methods that represented genuine scientific progress. They understood anatomy through careful dissection, tracked the progression of illnesses through detailed patient records, and experimented with treatments in ways that established medicine as a professional discipline. The temple hospitals that emerged in major cities combined religious healing with practical medical care. Priest-physicians understood that recovery required both divine favor and human intervention. They developed treatment protocols that addressed physical symptoms while also attending to the spiritual and emotional needs of patients. These institutions served not just the wealthy elite, but provided care for ordinary citizens who couldn't afford private physicians. Educational curricula expanded far beyond the basic literacy and numeracy required for administrative work. Advanced students studied literature, philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and law in institutions that resembled universities more than simple vocational schools. The intellectual elite that emerged from these educational systems possessed knowledge that rivaled scholars from much later historical periods. The preservation of knowledge became an institutional priority as Sumerian leaders recognized that cultural continuity required deliberate effort. Libraries maintained careful copies of important texts, creating multiple versions to protect against loss through fire, flood, or warfare. Scholarly traditions developed that emphasized accuracy in copying, systematic organization of materials, and commentary that explained difficult passages for future readers. Artistic traditions flourished in the wealthy urban environment that could support professional artists and craftsmen. Sculpture reached extraordinary levels of technical and aesthetic achievement. Painters developed sophisticated techniques for decorating walls, pottery, and textiles. Jewelry makers created pieces of stunning beauty using precious metals and gemstones imported from distant lands. These artistic achievements weren't merely decorative, but served important social and religious functions. The development of historical consciousness represented a crucial intellectual breakthrough. For the first time, humans began to understand themselves as part of a continuing story that extended backward into the past and forward into the future. Chronicles recorded the deeds of kings and the events of each year. Genealogies traced family lineages across generations. Origin stories explained how current conditions had emerged from earlier circumstances. Technological innovations continued at a rapid pace as urban workshops provided environments where craftsmen could specialize and experiment. The potter's wheel revolutionized ceramic production, enabling the creation of vessels with unprecedented precision and beauty. Improved metallurgical techniques produced stronger tools and weapons. Textile innovations created fabrics of remarkable quality and durability. The coordination of large-scale construction projects required management skills that rivaled modern corporate executives. Building a ziggurat involved thousands of workers laboring for years under careful supervision. Materials had to be procured from distant sources and transported to construction sites. Skilled craftsmen had to coordinate their efforts with unskilled laborers. Quality control systems ensured that structures would remain stable for centuries. Water management systems became increasingly sophisticated as cities grew larger and agricultural demands intensified. Engineers designed canal networks that could distribute water across vast areas while preventing flooding during seasonal deluges. Drainage systems protected urban areas from waterlogging. Reservoir construction enabled storage of water for use during dry periods. These hydraulic achievements represented some of the most impressive engineering projects in human history. The development of professional military forces created new social categories and political dynamics. Soldiers who served the state rather than personal lords developed loyalties that transcended traditional family and clan relationships. Military engineering produced weapons and fortifications that changed the nature of warfare. Strategic thinking evolved as commanders learned to coordinate large forces across complex terrain. Diplomatic protocols emerged as cities needed to conduct relationships with distant peoples whose customs and languages differed dramatically from their own. Ambassador systems enabled communication across cultural boundaries. Treaty-making procedures established frameworks for peaceful coexistence. Gift exchange created bonds of mutual obligation that helped prevent conflicts. The emergence of banking as a specialized profession transformed economic relationships throughout Sumerian society. Professional moneylenders developed sophisticated understanding of interest rates, risk assessment, and collateral requirements. Credit systems enabled merchants to conduct business across vast distances without carrying dangerous amounts of precious metals. Investment opportunities allowed wealthy individuals to multiply their resources through careful financial planning. Market systems became increasingly complex as urban populations created demand for goods that couldn't be produced locally. Professional merchants developed expertise in evaluating quality, negotiating prices, and managing transportation logistics. Market regulations protected consumers from fraud while ensuring fair competition among sellers. Standardized currency systems facilitated exchange between parties who had no prior relationship. The philosophical questions that emerged from urban living challenged traditional ways of understanding human existence and purpose. What obligations did individuals have toward their communities? How should resources be distributed among people with different needs and contributions? What constituted just punishment for crimes? How could conflicts be resolved without destroying social harmony? Religious festivals evolved into elaborate community celebrations that reinforced social bonds while providing spectacular entertainment. Processions featuring hundreds of participants wound through city streets. Dramatic presentations reenacted mythological stories before audiences of thousands. Feasting and music created shared experiences that united people across social divisions. The specialization of religious roles created professional priesthoods with sophisticated theological knowledge and administrative expertise. High priests managed vast institutional resources while maintaining complex ritual schedules. Specialized clergy developed expertise in divination, healing, education, and ceremonial performance. Religious hierarchies created career paths that enabled talented individuals to achieve positions of significant influence. Seasonal cycles required careful coordination of agricultural, religious, and commercial activities. Planting and harvest times had to align with ritual calendars and market schedules. Festival dates needed to accommodate agricultural work cycles. Trade expeditions had to account for weather patterns and religious obligations. The development of professional entertainment created new forms of artistic expression and social interaction. Musicians performed at religious ceremonies and secular gatherings. Storytellers preserved oral traditions while creating new narratives. Dancers developed elaborate choreographic traditions that combined athletic skill with artistic beauty. These entertainment forms weren't merely diversions, but important elements of cultural transmission and community building. Legal procedures became increasingly sophisticated as urban societies grappled with complex disputes that had no precedent in traditional customs. Evidence evaluation required systematic approaches to determining facts. Witness testimony needed careful assessment for reliability and bias. Punishment systems had to balance justice with social stability. The emergence of written contracts revolutionized business relationships and property rights. Commercial agreements could specify terms with unprecedented precision. Property transfers could be documented with legal certainty. Inheritance procedures could protect family interests across generations. These legal innovations created the foundation for complex economic relationships that would have been impossible in purely oral cultures. Urban planning reflected growing understanding of how physical environments affected social relationships and economic activities. Street layouts facilitated efficient movement of people and goods. Residential districts were organized to accommodate different social classes while maintaining community cohesion. Public spaces provided venues for gatherings that reinforced civic identity. The integration of foreign immigrants into Sumerian cities created multicultural communities that enriched artistic, intellectual, and commercial life. Different ethnic groups brought diverse skills, knowledge, and perspectives that enhanced urban prosperity. Cultural exchange produced hybrid traditions that combined elements from multiple backgrounds. These cosmopolitan environments fostered innovation and creativity that would have been impossible in more homogeneous societies. The careful balance between innovation and tradition that characterized Sumerian civilization enabled continuous adaptation without loss of cultural identity. New technologies were integrated into existing social frameworks rather than disrupting them entirely. Religious traditions evolved to accommodate changing circumstances while maintaining core beliefs and practices. Political institutions adapted to new challenges while preserving essential functions and relationships. The development of professional guilds transformed how knowledge and skills were transmitted across generations in Sumerian society. Master craftsmen no longer simply passed their expertise to their own children, but accepted apprentices from throughout the community based on talent and dedication. These guild systems created standardized training procedures that ensured consistent quality in everything from pottery and metalwork to textile production and carpentry. Young apprentices would spend years learning not just the technical aspects of their chosen craft, but also the business skills necessary for independent practice. They studied how to evaluate raw materials, estimate project costs, negotiate with customers, and manage workshops. The most talented apprentices could eventually establish their own businesses or even innovate new techniques that advanced their entire profession. The guild structures also provided social safety nets that protected members during difficult times. When craftsmen became ill or injured, their guild brothers would support their families and maintain their workshops. When economic downturns reduced demand for luxury goods, guilds would coordinate production schedules to ensure that all members received some work. These mutual support systems created stability that enabled long-term planning and investment in improved techniques. Competition between different cities spurred remarkable innovations as each community sought to distinguish itself through superior products and services. Ur became renowned for its exquisite jewelry and metalwork. Uruk developed a reputation for fine textiles and leather goods. Babylon emerged as a center for mathematical and astronomical learning. This specialization created trading relationships that connected cities across vast distances, while encouraging continuous improvement in each area of expertise. The emergence of professional scribes as a distinct social class revolutionized how information was collected, analyzed, and transmitted throughout Sumerian civilization. These educated individuals served not merely as record keepers, but as advisors to rulers, investigators of complex problems, and preservers of cultural knowledge. Their literacy skills made them indispensable for managing the increasingly complex administrative needs of growing urban centers. Scribal schools developed sophisticated curricula that went far beyond basic writing instruction. Students learned mathematics through practical problems involving taxation, trade calculations, and construction planning. They studied literature by copying and analyzing classic texts that preserved cultural values and historical memories. They practiced law by drafting contracts and legal documents that protected individual rights while serving community interests. The most advanced scribal students specialized in particular areas of expertise that reflected the complex needs of urban administration. Some became expert in foreign languages and served as translators for diplomatic missions and international trade negotiations. Others focused on astronomical observations and maintained the calendar systems that coordinated agricultural and religious activities. Still others concentrated on legal procedures and served as advisors to judges and administrators. The development of systematic record-keeping enabled Sumerian administrators to track complex patterns and trends that would have been invisible to earlier societies. Tax records revealed which agricultural techniques produced the highest yields. Trade documentation showed which routes were most profitable and which goods were in greatest demand. Military reports identified which defensive strategies were most effective against different types of threats. These administrative records also preserve detailed information about daily life that provides modern historians with unprecedented insight into how ordinary people lived, worked, and thought. We can trace individual families across multiple generations, understand how social mobility operated in practice, and observe how economic changes affected different segments of society. This documentary evidence reveals a civilization of remarkable complexity and sophistication. The legal codes that emerged from Sumerian cities represented humanity's first systematic attempt to create justice systems based on rational principles rather than arbitrary authority. These laws weren't simply lists of punishments, but carefully reasoned frameworks that balanced individual rights with community needs. They established procedures for gathering evidence, evaluating testimony, and ensuring that punishments matched the severity of crimes. Property rights received particular attention as urban societies grappled with questions about ownership, inheritance, and commercial transactions that had no precedent in simpler societies. Land ownership systems enabled individuals to accumulate wealth across generations while ensuring that productive resources remained in active use. Inheritance laws protected family interests while preventing the concentration of property in ways that might destabilize social relationships. Commercial law evolved to handle the complex transactions that connected Sumerian cities with trading partners throughout the known world. Contract procedures specified the rights and obligations of parties who might never meet face-to-face. Dispute resolution mechanisms provided fair settlements when disagreements arose over quality, delivery, or payment. Insurance concepts protected merchants against losses from theft, shipwreck, or political upheaval. The development of professional military forces created new forms of social organization that extended far beyond simple warfare. Military units became training grounds where young men from different social backgrounds learned to work together toward common goals. Veterans who had served together developed bonds of loyalty that created networks of mutual support throughout civilian society. Military engineering projects provided employment for thousands of workers while creating infrastructure that benefited entire communities. Strategic thinking evolved as military commanders learned to coordinate complex operations involving thousands of soldiers across vast territories. Intelligence gathering systems enabled leaders to understand enemy capabilities and intentions. Logistics networks ensured that armies could operate far from their home bases for extended periods. Diplomatic negotiations often prevented conflicts that might have devastated both sides. The integration of military and civilian authority required careful balancing of competing interests and priorities. Professional soldiers needed to remain subordinate to civilian leadership while maintaining the independence necessary for effective military action. Military expenses had to be balanced against other community needs like infrastructure maintenance, religious ceremonies, and social welfare programs. Seasonal festivals evolved into elaborate celebrations that reinforced community identity while providing spectacular entertainment for urban populations. These events required months of preparation as organizers coordinated performances, decorations, food preparation, and security arrangements. Participants came from throughout the region, creating opportunities for social interaction, commercial exchange, and cultural transmission that strengthened bonds between different communities. Religious processions featured hundreds of participants carrying elaborate costumes, musical instruments, and ceremonial objects through city streets. Dramatic presentations reenacted mythological stories that explained the origins of the world and humanity's place within it. Competitive games tested athletic skills while providing entertainment that appealed to spectators from all social levels. The economic impact of these festivals extended far beyond their immediate entertainment value. Merchants traveled great distances to sell specialized goods at festival markets. Craftsmen worked for months creating the costumes, decorations, and ceremonial objects required for proper celebration. Food producers supplied the massive quantities of bread, beer, meat, and other provisions necessary to feed thousands of visitors. Agricultural innovations continued at a rapid pace as farmers experimented with new crops, improved irrigation techniques, and more efficient harvesting methods. The introduction of the plough revolutionized food production by enabling cultivation of much larger areas with the same labor investment. Selective breeding of both plants and animals produced varieties that yielded more food, resisted diseases better, and adapted to local environmental conditions. Crop rotation systems maintained soil fertility across generations while maximizing productive output. Farmers learned to alternate grain crops with legumes that restored nitrogen to the soil. Fallow periods allowed land to recover from intensive cultivation. Composting techniques recycled organic waste into fertilizers that enhanced agricultural productivity. These innovations created the agricultural surplus that supported large urban populations. The development of food preservation and storage techniques enabled communities to survive poor harvest years while maintaining stable populations. Granaries protected grain from rodents, moisture, and theft. Fermentation processes created foods that could be stored for months without spoilage. Drying and salting techniques preserved meat and fish for extended periods. These food security systems provided the stability necessary for long-term planning and investment. Water management systems became increasingly sophisticated as cities grew larger and agricultural demands intensified. Engineers designed canal networks that could distribute water across vast areas while preventing flooding during seasonal deluges. Lock systems enabled boats to navigate waterways with different elevations. Drainage projects protected urban areas from waterlogging while reclaiming agricultural land from marshes. The coordination required for these massive hydraulic projects created new forms of social cooperation that transcended traditional family and tribal loyalties. Thousands of workers labored together on construction projects that might continue for decades. Different communities had to coordinate their efforts to maintain canal systems that served multiple cities. Dispute resolution mechanisms handled conflicts over water rights and maintenance responsibilities. Technological innovations in metallurgy produced tools and weapons that were far superior to anything previously available. Bronze working techniques created alloys that were harder and more durable than pure copper. Specialized tools enabled craftsmen to work with greater precision and efficiency. Advanced weapons gave professional armies significant advantages over less well-equipped opponents. The mining and smelting operations required to produce these metal goods created new industries that employed thousands of workers and connected Sumerian cities with distant sources of raw materials. Copper mines in distant mountains supplied the basic material for bronze production. Tin sources were even more scarce and valuable, requiring trade relationships that extended across continents. These mining operations represented some of the first large-scale industrial activities in human history. Architectural achievements reached extraordinary levels of sophistication as builders learned to construct massive structures that combined functional utility with aesthetic beauty. Temple complexes rose hundreds of feet into the air using construction techniques that distributed enormous weights safely across foundation systems built on marshy ground. Residential buildings incorporated advanced features like indoor plumbing, drainage systems, and climate control that provided comfort and convenience for urban dwellers. The engineering knowledge required for these construction projects represented centuries of accumulated experience and systematic experimentation. Builders understood principles of structural engineering that enabled them to create stable structures using available materials and tools. Mathematical calculations ensured that foundations could support the intended superstructures. Quality control systems maintained construction standards across projects that might continue for decades. Urban planning reflected growing understanding of how physical environments affected social relationships and economic activities. Street layouts facilitated efficient movement of people and goods, while providing adequate space for markets, workshops, and residential areas. Zoning concepts separated industrial activities that created noise and pollution from residential neighborhoods. Public spaces provided venues for gatherings that reinforced civic identity and community cooperation. The integration of religious, commercial, and residential functions within urban environments required careful coordination of competing needs and interests. Temple complexes needed space for large gatherings and ceremonial processions. Commercial districts required access to transportation networks and storage facilities. Residential areas needed protection from flooding while maintaining convenient access to markets and workshops. Social welfare systems emerged as urban communities recognized their obligations to care for members who couldn't support themselves through normal economic activities. Orphanages provided care for children whose parents had died from disease or warfare. Medical facilities treated illnesses and injuries that might otherwise have left individuals unable to work. Food distribution programs ensured that temporary unemployment or crop failures didn't result in starvation. These welfare systems weren't simply charitable activities, but practical investments in community stability and prosperity. Healthy populations were more productive and less likely to cause social disruption. Educated individuals could contribute specialized skills that benefited entire communities. Social safety nets encouraged innovation and entrepreneurship by reducing the risks associated with economic experimentation. The development of professional entertainment industries created new forms of artistic expression, while providing employment for talented individuals who might not have found outlets for their abilities in simpler societies. Musicians developed complex compositions that required years of training to perform properly. Storytellers created narratives that preserved historical memories while entertaining diverse audiences. Athletes competed in games that demonstrated human physical capabilities while providing spectacular entertainment. These entertainment forms served important social functions beyond simple amusement. Musical performances accompanied religious ceremonies that reinforced community values and spiritual beliefs. Athletic competitions provided non-violent outlets for competitive instincts that might otherwise have led to destructive conflicts. Storytelling traditions transmitted cultural knowledge across generations, while adapting to changing circumstances and audiences. The emergence of written literature represented a revolutionary development in human cultural evolution. For the first time, complex narratives could be preserved exactly as their creators intended, rather than changing gradually through oral transmission. Epic poems explored universal themes of heroism, friendship, love, and loss through characters whose psychological complexity rivaled modern literary creations. These works weren't merely entertainment, but sophisticated explorations of fundamental questions about human nature and purpose. The preservation of these literary achievements required institutional commitment to maintaining cultural memory across generations. Libraries carefully copied important texts to protect against loss through fire, flood, or warfare. Schools used classic literature as teaching materials that transmitted cultural values while developing literacy skills. Commentary traditions explained difficult passages and preserved interpretive knowledge that helped future readers understand complex works. The intellectual traditions that flourished within Sumerian temple schools created the world's first systematic approaches to understanding natural phenomena through careful observation and logical reasoning. Scholar priests spent decades studying the movements of celestial bodies, documenting patterns that revealed the mathematical relationships governing planetary motion. Their observations of eclipses, seasonal variations, and stellar configurations enabled them to predict astronomical events with remarkable accuracy. These astronomical studies weren't purely academic exercises, but practical necessities for agricultural societies that depended on precise timing for planting, harvesting, and irrigation management. The calendar systems developed by Sumerian astronomers balanced lunar months with solar years through complex mathematical calculations that required sophisticated understanding of fractional arithmetic and cyclical patterns. Their achievements in timekeeping provided the foundation for calendar systems that continue to influence how we organize temporal experience today. Mathematical knowledge advanced through practical applications in architecture, engineering, and commercial activities that demanded precise calculations. Sumerian mathematicians developed geometric principles that enabled the construction of massive buildings with accurate proportions and stable foundations. Their understanding of area calculations, volume measurements, and structural load distributions represented genuine scientific progress that accumulated across generations of scholarly investigation. The numerical systems they created reflected deep understanding of mathematical relationships and computational efficiency. Their base 60 system enabled complex calculations involving fractions and decimals that would have been impossible with simpler counting methods. Place value notation concepts that they pioneered became essential tools for advanced mathematics in all subsequent civilizations. Their multiplication tables, geometric formulas, and algebraic techniques demonstrate mathematical sophistication that rivals much later historical periods. Medical knowledge progressed through systematic observation of diseases, careful documentation of treatments, and experimental approaches to healing that combined empirical investigation with theoretical understanding. Sumerian physicians developed diagnostic techniques that could identify specific ailments through examination of symptoms, patient histories, and physical signs. Their pharmaceutical knowledge included hundreds of plant-based medicines, mineral preparations, and surgical procedures that represented accumulated centuries of practical experience. The medical texts preserved in temple libraries document sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, disease progression, and therapeutic interventions. Surgical procedures included operations for cataracts, kidney stones, and broken bones that required detailed knowledge of internal structures and healing processes. Obstetric care provided assistance during childbirth that significantly reduced maternal and infant mortality rates compared to earlier periods. Veterinary medicine developed alongside human medical knowledge as urban societies depended on healthy livestock for transportation, agricultural work, and food production. Animal doctors understood how to treat diseases that affected horses, cattle, sheep, and other domesticated species. Their knowledge of breeding techniques, nutritional requirements, and disease prevention enabled the maintenance of large herds that supported urban populations. The integration of medical knowledge with religious beliefs created healing traditions that address both physical and spiritual aspects of illness. Temple hospitals combined practical medical care with religious ceremonies designed to restore patients' relationships with divine powers. This holistic approach to healing recognized that recovery often required attention to psychological and social factors, as well as purely physical interventions. Craft specialization reached extraordinary levels of technical and artistic achievement, as urban workshops provided environments where master artisans could dedicate their entire careers to perfecting specific skills. Metalworkers developed techniques for creating alloys with precisely controlled properties that were superior to pure metals for particular applications. Their understanding of smelting temperatures, cooling rates, and tempering processes enabled production of tools and weapons that were both functional and beautiful. Textile production achieved remarkable sophistication through innovations in fiber processing, dyeing techniques, and weaving methods that created fabrics of extraordinary quality and durability. Sumerian weavers worked with wool, linen, and silk to produce textiles that were valued throughout the ancient world for their fineness, color fastness, and intricate patterns. Their looms enabled creation of complex designs that required mathematical precision and artistic vision. Pottery making evolved from simple utilitarian production to high artistic achievement that combined functional excellence with aesthetic beauty. Sumerian potters developed glazing techniques, decorative methods, and firing procedures that produced ceramics of remarkable quality. Their understanding of clay composition, forming techniques, and kiln management enabled mass production of standardized vessels while maintaining opportunities for individual artistic expression. Jewelry making reached levels of technical mastery that wouldn't be surpassed for centuries. Goldsmiths worked with precious metals and gemstones to create pieces of stunning beauty using techniques like granulation, filigree, and cloisonné that required extraordinary skill and patience. Their work wasn't merely decorative, but served important social functions by displaying wealth, status, and cultural identity through wearable art. The development of standardized weights and measures facilitated fair commercial exchange while enabling precise construction and manufacturing processes. Sumerian merchants could conduct business across vast distances with confidence that measurements would be consistent and reliable. Builders could coordinate complex construction projects involving thousands of workers because everyone understood exactly what dimensions and quantities were specified in architectural plans. These measurement standards weren't arbitrary conventions, but carefully calibrated systems based on natural phenomena and mathematical relationships. Length measurements derived from human body proportions that could be verified anywhere. Weight standards used precious metals that could be tested for purity and authenticity. Volume measures related to practical containers that were commonly available throughout trading networks. Banking systems evolved to meet the complex financial needs of urban societies, where commercial transactions often involved delayed payments, long-distance trade, and investment opportunities that required sophisticated risk assessment. Professional moneylenders developed understanding of interest rates, collateral evaluation, and creditworthiness that enabled them to provide financial services while protecting their own investments. The emergence of credit instruments enabled merchants to conduct business without carrying dangerous amounts of precious metals across long distances. Letters of credit allowed traders to access funds in distant cities through banking networks that spanned continents. Investment partnerships enabled wealthy individuals to participate in profitable ventures while spreading risks across multiple opportunities. Insurance concepts protected against losses from natural disasters, theft, warfare, and commercial failures that could otherwise have destroyed individual merchants or entire trading expeditions. These risk-sharing arrangements enabled larger and more ambitious commercial ventures, while providing security that encouraged long-term planning and investment. Commercial law evolved to handle disputes involving complex transactions between parties who might never meet face-to-face, and whose cultural backgrounds might differ dramatically. Contract procedures specified the rights and obligations of all participants while providing mechanisms for resolving disagreements that inevitably arose in long-distance trade. Arbitration systems enabled fair settlements without resorting to violence or lengthy legal proceedings. The development of professional diplomatic services enabled peaceful relationships between communities whose interests might otherwise have led to destructive conflicts. Ambassadors learned foreign languages and customs that enabled effective communication across cultural boundaries. Treaty-making procedures established frameworks for cooperation that could endure across changes in leadership and circumstances. Gift exchange systems created bonds of mutual obligation that reinforced diplomatic relationships while facilitating cultural transmission. Rulers exchanged valuable objects that demonstrated their wealth and artistic capabilities while establishing personal relationships that could prevent conflicts during tense situations. These diplomatic gifts often included artisans who could teach new techniques and scholars who could share knowledge across cultural boundaries. Marriage alliances between ruling families created kinship networks that connected different communities through blood relationships that transcended political boundaries. These diplomatic marriages weren't merely personal arrangements, but carefully negotiated agreements that balanced competing interests while creating new opportunities for cooperation and cultural exchange. The coordination of multi-city projects required unprecedented levels of cooperation and planning that transcended traditional loyalties and rivalries. Canal systems that served multiple communities needed agreements about construction costs, maintenance responsibilities, and water allocation that could remain stable across generations. Military alliances required coordination of troops, supplies, and strategic planning that demanded high levels of trust and communication. Regional festivals brought together people from throughout Mesopotamia for celebrations that reinforced cultural unity while providing opportunities for commercial exchange and diplomatic negotiation. These gatherings required massive logistical coordination involving transportation, accommodation, security, and provisioning for thousands of participants from diverse backgrounds. The emergence of common cultural standards enabled communication and cooperation across political boundaries that might otherwise have remained isolated and suspicious of each other. Shared religious beliefs provided frameworks for understanding divine will and moral obligation that transcended local variations. Common literary traditions created cultural references that educated people throughout the region could understand and appreciate. Educational exchange programs enabled talented young people to study in distant cities where they could learn specialized skills and knowledge that weren't available in their home communities. These scholarly networks created intellectual connections that facilitated the rapid spread of innovations and discoveries across vast geographical areas. The development of historical consciousness enabled Sumerian societies to understand themselves as part of continuing stories that extended both backward into the past and forward into the future. Chronicles preserved records of important events that could guide decision-making during similar circumstances. Genealogies traced family and political relationships across generations that helped maintain stability during periods of change. Origin stories explained how current conditions had emerged from earlier circumstances, while providing moral frameworks for understanding proper behavior and social obligations. These narratives weren't merely entertainment, but sophisticated attempts to understand causation, meaning, and purpose in human affairs that established intellectual foundations for all subsequent philosophical and religious thought. Prophetic traditions emerged as societies grappled with uncertainty about future events and sought divine guidance for important decisions. Professional diviners developed techniques for interpreting omens, dreams, and natural phenomena that provided frameworks for understanding divine will and cosmic patterns. These practices combined careful observation with systematic interpretation that represented early forms of scientific methodology. The integration of rational analysis with spiritual understanding created intellectual traditions that balanced empirical observation with recognition of forces beyond human comprehension or control. This sophisticated approach to knowledge enabled continuous learning and adaptation while maintaining respect for mystery and transcendence that prevented arrogance and overconfidence. The legacy of these intellectual achievements extended far beyond their immediate practical applications to influence fundamental human approaches to understanding reality, organizing society, and pursuing knowledge. The scientific methods, legal principles, educational systems, and cultural institutions that emerged in ancient Sumer provided templates that continue to shape human civilization thousands of years after their original development. The preservation of cultural knowledge through institutional memory became one of Sumer's most remarkable achievements, creating systems that could maintain continuity across centuries of political upheaval and social change. Temple libraries developed sophisticated cataloging methods that organized thousands of tablets by subject matter, chronological period, and geographical origin. Scribal traditions established procedures for copying texts that ensured accuracy while allowing for careful annotation and commentary that explained obscure references for future readers. These knowledge preservation systems weren't simply storage facilities, but active centers of learning where scholars continuously analyzed, interpreted, and expanded upon inherited wisdom. Advanced students spent years studying classical texts while contributing their own observations and discoveries to the accumulated body of knowledge. Commentary traditions developed that explained difficult passages, while preserving multiple interpretive approaches that reflected different scholarly perspectives and regional variations. The emergence of professional teaching as a specialized occupation created educational institutions that could transmit complex knowledge across generations with remarkable consistency. Master teachers developed pedagogical techniques that balanced memorization of essential information with training in analytical thinking and creative problem solving. Their curricula prepared students not just to reproduce existing knowledge, but to contribute new insights that advance their fields of expertise. International scholarly exchange networks facilitated the rapid spread of innovations across vast geographical areas, as students and teachers traveled between different centers of learning. These intellectual connections created collaborative relationships that transcended political boundaries and cultural differences. Scholars who had studied together maintained correspondence that enabled continuous sharing of discoveries and theoretical developments throughout their careers. The development of critical thinking methods enabled scholars to evaluate competing claims and theories through systematic analysis rather than simply accepting traditional authorities. These intellectual procedures required careful examination of evidence, logical reasoning about cause and effect relationships, and willingness to revise conclusions when new information became available. Such rigorous approaches to knowledge represented fundamental advances in human cognitive capabilities. Experimental methodologies emerged as scholars learned to test their theories through controlled observations and deliberate manipulation of variables. Medical researchers investigated the effectiveness of different treatments by comparing outcomes among patients with similar conditions. Agricultural scientists tested new cultivation techniques on small plots before recommending widespread adoption. These empirical approaches provided reliable methods for distinguishing effective procedures from ineffective ones. The integration of theoretical knowledge with practical application created educational programs that prepared students for real-world problem-solving rather than mere academic exercise. Engineering students learned mathematical principles through actual construction projects that required precise calculations and careful attention to material properties. Medical students gained experience by assisting established physicians with actual patients rather than studying only abstract descriptions of diseases and treatments. Competitive examination systems ensured that important positions were filled by individuals with demonstrated competence rather than simply inherited status or political connections. These merit-based selection procedures created incentives for serious study while providing communities with qualified professionals who could handle complex responsibilities effectively. The most challenging examinations tested not just factual knowledge, but ability to apply learning to novel situations that required creative thinking and sound judgment. Professional associations developed among practitioners of specialized occupations who shared common interests and faced similar challenges. These organizations established ethical standards, coordinated training programs, and provided mutual support during difficult circumstances. Members collaborated on research projects that advanced their fields while maintaining competitive relationships that encouraged individual excellence and innovation. The standardization of professional practices enabled reliable cooperation between specialists from different cities and cultural backgrounds. Engineers who had trained in different schools could work together on major construction projects because they shared common technical vocabularies and procedural approaches. Physicians could consult with colleagues about difficult cases because they understood similar diagnostic methods and treatment protocols. Quality control systems maintained standards of excellence across diverse production activities while enabling continuous improvement through systematic evaluation of results. Master craftsmen developed inspection procedures that identified defective work before it reached customers. Agricultural supervisors monitored crop yields and livestock health to identify the most effective farming techniques. These quality assurance programs protected community reputations while encouraging innovation and efficiency improvements. Innovation incentives encouraged individuals to develop new techniques and technologies that could benefit entire communities. Successful inventors received recognition, financial rewards, and opportunities to teach their discoveries to others. Patent-like systems protected innovators' interests while ensuring that beneficial discoveries would eventually become available for widespread use. These intellectual property concepts balanced individual creativity with community welfare in sophisticated ways. The emergence of research institutions dedicated to advancing knowledge for its own sake represented a remarkable cultural achievement that transcended immediate practical needs. Scholars pursued investigations into mathematics, astronomy, literature, and philosophy that might have no obvious applications, but satisfied human curiosity about fundamental questions. These pure research activities often led to unexpected practical benefits while establishing intellectual traditions that valued learning as an inherently worthwhile pursuit. Funding mechanisms for research and education evolved as communities recognized the long-term benefits of investing in knowledge advancement. Wealthy individuals endowed schools and libraries that could operate independently of immediate political pressures. Temple institutions allocated portions of their resources to scholarly activities that might not produce immediate returns, but enhanced community prestige and cultural sophistication. The development of scholarly publishing systems enabled researchers to share their discoveries with colleagues throughout the known world. Standardized formats for research reports facilitated communication across linguistic and cultural boundaries. Distribution networks ensured that important discoveries reached interested scholars regardless of geographical distance or political obstacles. Collaborative research projects brought together specialists with different types of expertise to tackle complex problems that exceeded the capabilities of individual investigators. Astronomical observations required coordination between mathematicians who could perform calculations, craftsmen who could build instruments, and observers who could collect accurate data. Medical research benefited from collaboration between physicians who understood diseases, chemists who could prepare medicines, and surgeons who possessed anatomical knowledge. The establishment of academic conferences and scholarly meetings created opportunities for researchers to present their work, receive feedback from colleagues, and form collaborative relationships that advanced their investigations. These gatherings facilitated rapid communication of new discoveries, while providing forums for debate and discussion that refined theoretical understanding and practical applications. International academic exchanges enabled talented students and established scholars to study in foreign institutions, where they could learn different approaches and perspectives that enriched their own intellectual development. These programs created networks of personal relationships that facilitated ongoing collaboration across political and cultural boundaries, while spreading innovations throughout the ancient world. The development of academic reputation systems created incentives for scholarly excellence, while providing communities with reliable methods for identifying the most knowledgeable and capable experts. Scholars who made significant contributions to their fields earned recognition that enabled them to attract students, secure funding, and influence policy decisions. These reputation mechanisms encouraged rigorous research while maintaining accountability to community standards and expectations. Ethical frameworks for scholarly conduct established principles that balanced individual ambition with collective welfare and truth-seeking. Researchers were expected to report their findings honestly, acknowledge the contributions of others, and consider the potential consequences of their discoveries. These professional standards created trust that enabled effective collaboration while protecting communities from harmful applications of knowledge. The integration of scholarship with practical governance created advisory systems that enabled political leaders to benefit from expert knowledge when making important decisions. Specialist consultants provided technical expertise about engineering projects, military strategies, economic policies, and diplomatic negotiations. These advisory relationships balanced scholarly independence with practical relevance, while ensuring that important decisions reflected the best available knowledge. Technological development accelerated through systematic research and development programs that combined theoretical understanding with practical experimentation. Metallurgists investigated the properties of different alloys through controlled experiments that revealed optimal compositions for specific applications. Architects tested new construction techniques on small projects before employing them in major buildings. These research approaches reduced risks while enabling continuous improvement in technical capabilities. The emergence of patent-like systems protected inventors' interests while encouraging innovation and ensuring that beneficial discoveries would eventually become widely available. Successful innovators received exclusive rights to profit from their inventions for limited periods, after which the knowledge became public property. These intellectual property arrangements balanced individual incentives with community benefits in ways that promoted both creativity and social welfare. Standardization of technical procedures enabled reliable cooperation between specialists from different backgrounds while maintaining opportunities for improvement and innovation. Engineering standards ensured that components produced in different workshops could work together effectively. Medical protocols provided frameworks for diagnosis and treatment that could be understood by practitioners throughout the region. These standardized approaches facilitated large-scale cooperation while preserving flexibility for local adaptation. Quality assurance programs maintained excellence in production while enabling continuous improvement through systematic evaluation of results and procedures. Master craftsmen developed inspection techniques that identified potential problems before they caused failures. Agricultural specialists monitored crop performance to identify the most effective cultivation methods. These quality control systems protected community reputations while encouraging innovation and efficiency gains. The development of professional training programs ensured that complex skills could be transmitted reliably across generations while adapting to changing circumstances and new discoveries. Apprenticeship systems combined hands-on experience with theoretical instruction that prepared students for independent practice. Advanced training opportunities enabled experienced practitioners to update their knowledge and learn new techniques throughout their careers. Continuing education programs enabled professionals to maintain current knowledge as their fields evolved through new discoveries and changing circumstances. Physicians attended conferences where they learned about new treatments and diagnostic techniques. Engineers studied innovations in materials and construction methods that could improve their projects. These ongoing learning opportunities ensured that professional standards continued to advance rather than stagnating at traditional levels. The integration of education with practical experience created training programs that prepared students for real-world challenges rather than merely theoretical understanding. Medical students gained experience by working alongside established physicians with actual patients. Engineering apprentices participated in major construction projects where they could observe how theoretical principles apply to practical problems. These experiential learning approaches produced competent practitioners who could handle complex responsibilities effectively. Evaluation systems assessed both knowledge acquisition and practical competence to ensure that graduates possessed the full range of skills necessary for professional success. Written examinations tested theoretical understanding, while practical demonstrations evaluated ability to apply knowledge effectively. These comprehensive assessment procedures provided reliable indicators of professional readiness while identifying areas where additional training might be needed. The emergence of specialized research institutions created environments where scholars could pursue investigations that might not have immediate practical applications, but advanced fundamental understanding of natural phenomena and human behavior. These research centers operated independently of immediate commercial or political pressures, while maintaining connections to practical applications that could benefit entire communities. International cooperation in research and education created networks of scholars who could collaborate across political boundaries while sharing the benefits of their discoveries throughout the ancient world. Joint research projects tackled problems that exceeded the capabilities of individual institutions. Student exchange programs enabled talented individuals to study in foreign centers of learning where they could gain different perspectives and approaches. The preservation of research results through systematic documentation and archival procedures ensured that hard-won knowledge wouldn't be lost through accidents, wars, or institutional changes. Libraries maintained careful copies of important research reports while developing cataloging systems that enabled future scholars to locate relevant information efficiently. These preservation efforts created cumulative knowledge bases that could support increasingly sophisticated investigations. The development of research methodologies provided systematic approaches to investigation that could produce reliable results across different fields of study. Experimental procedures enabled controlled testing of hypotheses, while observational techniques facilitated careful data collection about complex phenomena. These methodological advances represented fundamental improvements in human cognitive capabilities that influenced all subsequent intellectual development. Development. The systematic documentation of research findings created comprehensive knowledge repositories that transformed how information could be accessed and utilized across Sumerian civilization. Scholar priests developed intricate filing systems that organized thousands of clay tablets according to subject matter, chronological sequence, and level of complexity. These archives weren't merely storage facilities, but dynamic research centers where investigators could quickly locate relevant information, compare different approaches to similar problems, and build upon previous discoveries to advance their understanding. Cross-referencing techniques enable scholars to trace connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena, revealing patterns and relationships that might otherwise have remained hidden. Astronomical observations could be correlated with agricultural cycles to optimize planting schedules. Medical treatments could be compared across different patient populations to identify the most effective therapeutic approaches. These analytical methods represented sophisticated approaches to data analysis that enhanced decision-making throughout Sumerian society. The development of theoretical frameworks provided conceptual structures that enabled scholars to organize complex information into coherent systems of understanding. Mathematical principles unified diverse calculation techniques into systematic approaches that could be applied to new problems. Medical theories connected individual symptoms to broader patterns of disease progression that improved diagnostic accuracy. These theoretical advances transformed scattered observations into systematic knowledge that could be transmitted effectively to future generations. Peer review processes emerged as scholarly communities developed methods for evaluating research quality and ensuring accuracy of reported findings. Expert panels examined new discoveries before they were accepted into the established body of knowledge. Collaborative verification procedures required independent confirmation of important results. These quality control mechanisms protected against errors while maintaining standards of intellectual rigor that enhanced the reliability of scholarly work. The integration of multiple research approaches created interdisciplinary investigations that could address complex problems requiring diverse types of expertise. Architectural projects benefited from collaboration between mathematicians who performed structural calculations, geologists who assessed foundation conditions, and craftsmen who understood material properties. Agricultural improvements resulted from cooperation between botanists who studied plant genetics, engineers who designed irrigation systems, and economists who analyzed production costs. Funding mechanisms evolved to support long-term research projects that might require years or decades to produce practical results. Wealthy patrons endowed research positions that enabled scholars to pursue investigations without immediate commercial applications. Temple institutions allocated resources to pure research activities that enhanced community prestige while contributing to the accumulated store of human knowledge. These investment strategies recognize that fundamental research often led to unexpected practical benefits that justified initial expenditures. The establishment of research priorities enabled communities to focus their limited resources on investigations that promised the greatest benefits for society as a whole, Advisory committees evaluated proposed projects based on potential applications, resource requirements, and likelihood of success. Strategic planning processes balance support for fundamental research with attention to immediate practical needs. These resource allocation decisions required sophisticated understanding of research processes and their potential outcomes. Communication networks facilitated rapid sharing of research results across vast geographical distances through systematic correspondence between scholars in different cities. Standardized reporting formats enabled effective information exchange despite linguistic and cultural differences. Translation services ensured that important discoveries could reach interested researchers regardless of language barriers. These communication systems created intellectual communities that transcended political boundaries and cultural divisions. The development of research ethics established principles that govern scholarly conduct while balancing individual freedom with community welfare. Investigators were expected to report their findings honestly, acknowledge the contributions of collaborators, and consider potential consequences of their discoveries. Professional standards protected research subjects while maintaining scientific integrity. These ethical frameworks created trust that enabled effective collaboration while preventing harmful applications of knowledge. Specialized research tools and instruments enhanced observational capabilities, while enabling more precise measurements and controlled experiments. Astronomical devices improved the accuracy of celestial observations that were essential for calendar calculations and navigation. Medical instruments enabled detailed anatomical studies that advanced understanding of human physiology. Mathematical tools facilitated complex calculations that supported engineering projects and commercial transactions. The training of professional researchers created cadres of specialists who could conduct sophisticated investigations while mentoring the next generation of scholars. Advanced educational programs combined theoretical instruction with hands-on research experience that prepared students for independent investigation. Apprenticeship systems enabled experienced researchers to transmit complex skills through direct supervision and collaborative work. These training approaches ensured continuity of research capabilities across generations. Innovation diffusion processes enabled beneficial discoveries to spread throughout society while adapting to local conditions and specific applications. Demonstration projects showed how new techniques could be implemented in different contexts. Training programs taught practitioners how to apply research findings to their particular circumstances. These technology transfer activities ensured that research investments produced widespread benefits rather than remaining confined to academic institutions. The emergence of research competitions created incentives for excellence while fostering collaboration and knowledge sharing among investigators. Prizes rewarded significant discoveries while encouraging risk-taking and creative approaches to difficult problems. Collaborative challenges brought together researchers with different specialties to tackle complex interdisciplinary problems. These competitive mechanisms motivated high-quality work while building professional relationships that enhanced future research efforts. International research exchanges facilitated cooperation between scholars from different cultural backgrounds while spreading innovations across political boundaries. Visiting researcher programs enabled specialists to study in foreign institutions where they could learn different approaches and perspectives. Joint research projects tackled problems that exceeded the capabilities of individual communities. These collaborative activities created networks of personal relationships that enhanced communication and trust between different societies. The documentation of research failures provided valuable learning opportunities while preventing repetition of unsuccessful approaches. Systematic records of failed experiments identified problematic methods and unrealistic expectations. Analysis of unsuccessful projects revealed common pitfalls that could be avoided in future investigations. These failure analysis procedures enhanced research efficiency while contributing to methodological improvements that benefited all investigators. Quality assurance systems maintained high standards of research while enabling continuous improvement in methodological approaches. Regular audits evaluated research procedures and results to identify potential problems before they compromised important findings. Standardized protocols ensured consistency across different research groups while maintaining flexibility for innovation and adaptation. These quality control mechanisms protected the integrity of research while encouraging excellence and creativity. The integration of research with practical applications created feedback loops that enhanced both theoretical understanding and practical effectiveness. Real-world testing of research findings revealed unexpected problems and opportunities that influenced future investigations. Practical experience informed theoretical development, while research insights improved practical applications. These iterative processes created synergistic relationships between knowledge development and practical problem solving. Research infrastructure development provided the physical and institutional foundations necessary for sophisticated investigations. Specialized facilities housed complex equipment and provided controlled environments for sensitive experiments. Administrative systems managed resources and personnel while maintaining records and facilitating communication. These infrastructure investments created capabilities that enabled increasingly ambitious research projects while supporting collaborative activities across multiple institutions. The establishment of research libraries created comprehensive collections of scholarly materials that supported investigation and education throughout the region. Systematic acquisition policies ensured that important works were available to interested researchers regardless of their institutional affiliations. Preservation programs protected valuable materials from damage while maintaining accessibility for future generations. These library systems created shared intellectual resources that enhanced research capabilities throughout Sumerian civilization. Professional development programs enabled researchers to update their knowledge and skills throughout their careers while adapting to changing circumstances and new discoveries. Continuing education opportunities provided access to latest developments in relevant fields. Sabbatical programs enabled intensive study and research that refreshed perspectives and capabilities. These career development systems maintained high levels of professional competence while encouraging lifelong learning and adaptation. The emergence of research journals and scholarly publications created systematic methods for sharing discoveries while maintaining quality standards through editorial review processes. Standardized formats facilitated communication across linguistic and cultural boundaries while enabling efficient information storage and retrieval. Distribution networks ensured that important findings reached interested scholars throughout the known world. These publication systems created permanent records of human knowledge while enabling cumulative progress in understanding. Collaborative research networks brought together specialists from different institutions and geographical areas to tackle complex problems that exceeded individual capabilities. Coordinated research programs enabled systematic investigation of related questions while avoiding unnecessary duplication of effort. Resource sharing arrangements provided access to specialized equipment and expertise that might not be available at individual institutions. These collaborative structures enhanced research efficiency while building professional relationships that facilitated future cooperation. The development of research planning methodologies enabled investigators to design studies that could produce reliable results while making efficient use of available resources. Project management techniques coordinated complex investigations involving multiple participants and extended time periods. Risk assessment procedures identified potential problems before they could compromise research outcomes. These planning approaches enhanced research effectiveness while reducing waste and improving success rates. Innovation management systems created structured approaches to identifying, developing, and implementing beneficial discoveries while minimizing risks associated with new technologies. Evaluation committees assessed potential innovations based on technical feasibility, economic viability, and social acceptability. Pilot testing programs enabled controlled evaluation of new approaches before widespread implementation. These innovation systems balanced encouragement of creativity with prudent risk management that protected community interests. The integration of research with education created learning environments that combined knowledge transmission with knowledge creation through collaborative investigation between students and faculty. Advanced students participated in original research projects that contributed to their education while advancing scholarly understanding. Teaching activities enabled experienced researchers to organize and communicate their knowledge while training the next generation of investigators. These educational research programs created synergistic relationships that enhanced both learning and discovery. Technology assessment capabilities enabled communities to evaluate potential impacts of new discoveries before implementing them on large scales. Expert committees analyzed technical, economic, social, and environmental consequences of proposed innovations. Public consultation processes ensured that community values and concerns were considered in technology adoption decisions. These assessment procedures balanced benefits of innovation with protection of established interests and community welfare. The establishment of research ethics committees created institutional mechanisms for ensuring that investigations were conducted according to accepted moral and professional standards. Review procedures evaluated proposed research for potential risks to participants and communities while ensuring scientific validity. Ongoing monitoring systems tracked research activities to identify problems that might require intervention. These ethical oversight mechanisms protected research subjects while maintaining public trust in scholarly activities. Research funding diversification created multiple sources of support that reduced dependence on any single patron while enabling pursuit of diverse research priorities. Government support enabled investigations that served public interests, but might not attract private investment. Commercial funding facilitated applied research that could produce marketable innovations. Philanthropic contributions supported fundamental research that advanced knowledge for its own sake. These diverse funding mechanisms created stable support for comprehensive research programs that balanced different types of investigation. The development of research evaluation metrics enabled systematic assessment of research productivity and impact while providing guidance for resource allocation decisions. Publication counts measured scholarly output, while citation analysis revealed influence and importance of different contributions. Patent applications indicated practical applications of research findings, while technology adoption rates showed real-world impact. These evaluation systems provided objective measures of research effectiveness, while guiding strategic planning and investment decisions. International research cooperation agreements created frameworks for collaborative investigation that transcended political boundaries while respecting sovereignty and cultural differences. Treaty arrangements established procedures for sharing research costs and benefits while protecting intellectual property rights. Exchange programs facilitated personnel movement while ensuring that participating communities benefited from collaborative activities. These international agreements created stable foundations for long-term research partnerships that enhanced capabilities throughout the ancient world. The emergence of research entrepreneurship enabled investigators to translate their discoveries into practical applications that benefited society while providing financial rewards for successful innovation. Business incubation programs supported researchers who wanted to commercialize their findings while maintaining academic affiliations. Technology transfer offices facilitated cooperation between research institutions and commercial enterprises. These entrepreneurial systems created incentives for practical application of research while maintaining support for fundamental investigation. Research impact assessment methodologies enabled systematic evaluation of how scholarly discoveries influenced practical problem-solving and social development throughout Sumerian civilization. Longitudinal studies tracked the diffusion and application of research findings across different sectors of society. Cost-benefit analyses measured the returns on research investments while identifying the most productive areas for future support. These impact assessment procedures provided evidence-based guidance for research policy, while demonstrating the value of scholarly investigation to community leaders and funding sources. The sophistication of Sumerian research and development capabilities created intellectual foundations that influenced every subsequent civilization, while establishing methodological approaches that continue to shape human knowledge-seeking activities thousands of years after their original development. Their systematic approaches to investigation, documentation, and application transformed scattered observations into cumulative understanding that could be transmitted across generations and adapted to changing circumstances. This remarkable intellectual achievement represented one of humanity's greatest advances in cognitive capability and social organization. The philosophical implications of Sumerian intellectual achievements extended far beyond their immediate practical applications to establish fundamental approaches to understanding reality that would influence human thought for millennia. Their systematic methods for investigating natural phenomena created conceptual frameworks that balanced empirical observation with recognition of underlying patterns and principles that governed both physical and social phenomena. These early scientists understood that reliable knowledge required careful documentation, systematic comparison, and willingness to revise conclusions when new evidence contradicted established beliefs. The emergence of abstract thinking capabilities enabled Sumerian scholars to develop mathematical concepts that transcended immediate practical applications while providing tools for understanding complex relationships in both natural and human systems. Their geometric principles revealed universal patterns that appeared in architectural structures, astronomical movements, and artistic compositions. Number theory investigations uncovered mathematical relationships that seemed to reflect fundamental properties of reality itself, rather than merely human conveniences for counting and calculation. Logical reasoning methods evolved through practical applications in legal proceedings, administrative decision-making, and theological debates that required systematic evaluation of competing claims and evidence. Sumerian judges developed procedures for weighing testimony, assessing credibility, and reaching conclusions based on available information, rather than arbitrary preferences or traditional prejudices. These analytical approaches established precedents for rational decision-making that influenced all subsequent legal and administrative systems. The integration of rational analysis with spiritual understanding created intellectual traditions that avoided the extremes of both naive materialism and uncritical superstition. Sumerian thinkers recognized that human knowledge had inherent limitations while maintaining confidence in their ability to discover reliable information about natural phenomena and social relationships. This balanced epistemology enabled continuous learning and adaptation while preserving humility about the ultimate mysteries of existence. Ethical frameworks for knowledge application emerged as Sumerian societies grappled with questions about how discoveries should be used and who should benefit from intellectual advances. Scholar priests developed principles that balanced individual achievement with community welfare while recognizing obligations to preserve and transmit knowledge to future generations. These early discussions of intellectual responsibility established traditions that influenced scholarly ethics throughout subsequent history. The democratization of knowledge through educational institutions created opportunities for talented individuals from diverse backgrounds to contribute to intellectual advancement regardless of their family origins or economic circumstances. Merit-based selection procedures ensured that important scholarly positions were filled by qualified individuals rather than simply inherited privileges. These educational opportunities enabled social mobility while enriching intellectual life through inclusion of diverse perspectives and experiences. Cultural synthesis processes enabled Sumerian civilization to absorb and integrate knowledge from different regions and ethnic groups while maintaining distinctive identity and coherent worldviews. Foreign scholars brought new ideas and techniques that enriched local traditions without completely displacing established practices. This cultural openness created dynamic intellectual environments that fostered innovation while preserving valuable inherited wisdom. The standardization of intellectual procedures created common methodologies that enabled effective cooperation between scholars from different backgrounds and geographical regions. Shared approaches to research design, data collection, and analysis facilitated collaborative investigations, while ensuring that results could be compared and verified across different studies. These methodological standards enhanced the reliability of knowledge while enabling cumulative progress in understanding. Quality control mechanisms developed within scholarly communities created peer review processes that maintained high standards of intellectual rigor while providing constructive feedback that improved research quality. Expert evaluation panels assessed new discoveries before they were accepted into established bodies of knowledge. Collaborative verification procedures required independent confirmation of important findings. These quality assurance systems protected against errors while encouraging excellence and innovation. The emergence of specialized scholarly languages enabled precise communication about complex concepts that might be ambiguous or confusing in ordinary discourse. Technical vocabularies developed within different fields of study provided exact terminology for describing phenomena, procedures, and relationships that required careful distinction and definition. These specialized languages facilitated professional communication while enabling more sophisticated analysis of complex subjects. Documentation standards created systematic approaches to recording observations, procedures, and conclusions that enabled reliable transmission of knowledge across time and space. Standardized formats for research reports facilitated comparison between different investigations while ensuring that essential information was preserved. Archive organization systems enabled efficient storage and retrieval of scholarly materials. These documentation practices created permanent records that supported cumulative knowledge development. The integration of theoretical understanding with practical application created feedback loops that enhanced both abstract knowledge and concrete problem-solving capabilities. Real-world testing of theoretical principles revealed unexpected complexities and opportunities that informed future research directions. Practical experience provided data that supported or challenged theoretical models. These iterative processes created synergistic relationships between pure and applied research that accelerated intellectual progress. International scholarly networks facilitated rapid communication of discoveries while creating collaborative relationships that transcended political boundaries and cultural differences. Correspondence systems enabled researchers to share findings and coordinate investigations across vast geographical distances. Exchange programs allowed scholars to study in foreign institutions, where they could learn different approaches and perspectives. These international connections created intellectual communities that enhanced research capabilities throughout the ancient world. Innovation diffusion mechanisms ensured that beneficial discoveries reached practical applications while adapting to local conditions and specific needs. Demonstration projects showed how new techniques could be implemented in different contexts. Training programs taught practitioners how to apply research findings to their particular circumstances. These technology transfer activities translated scholarly achievements into widespread social benefits. The establishment of research priorities enabled communities to focus limited resources on investigations that promised the greatest benefits while maintaining balance between fundamental research and immediate practical needs. Advisory committees evaluated proposed projects based on potential applications, resource requirements, and likelihood of success. Strategic planning processes coordinated research efforts across different institutions and disciplines. These resource allocation decisions required sophisticated understanding of research processes and their potential outcomes. Funding diversification created multiple sources of support that reduced dependence on any single patron while enabling pursuit of diverse research priorities and approaches. Government funding supported investigations that served public interests but might not attract private investment. Commercial sponsorship facilitated applied research that could produce marketable innovations. Philanthropic contributions enabled fundamental research that advanced knowledge for its own sake. These diverse funding mechanisms created stable foundations for comprehensive research programs. Professional development systems enabled scholars to maintain current knowledge throughout their careers while adapting to changing circumstances and new discoveries. Continuing education opportunities provided access to latest developments in relevant fields. Sabbatical programs enabled intensive study and research that refreshed perspectives and capabilities. Conference participation facilitated networking and collaboration with colleagues from other institutions. These career development mechanisms maintained high levels of professional competence. The emergence of research entrepreneurship created opportunities for scholars to translate their discoveries into practical applications that benefited society while providing financial rewards for successful innovation. Business incubation programs supported researchers who wanted to commercialize their findings. Technology transfer offices facilitated cooperation between academic institutions and commercial enterprises. Patent systems protected inventors' rights while ensuring eventual public access to beneficial innovations. Ethical oversight mechanisms created institutional safeguards that ensured research was conducted according to accepted moral and professional standards, while protecting the rights and welfare of research subjects and communities. Review committees evaluated proposed investigations for potential risks and benefits. Monitoring systems tracked ongoing research to identify problems that might require intervention. These ethical frameworks created trust that enabled effective collaboration while preventing harmful applications of knowledge. The development of impact assessment methodologies enabled systematic evaluation of how scholarly discoveries influence practical problem-solving and social development throughout Sumerian civilization. Longitudinal studies tracked the diffusion and application of research findings across different sectors of society. Cost-benefit analyses measured returns on research investments while identifying productive areas for future support. These assessment procedures provided evidence-based guidance for research policy. Research infrastructure development created physical and institutional foundations necessary for sophisticated investigations, while supporting collaborative activities across multiple organizations. Specialized facilities housed complex equipment and provided controlled environments for sensitive experiments. Administrative systems managed resources and personnel while maintaining records and facilitating communication. Library collections provided comprehensive access to scholarly materials. These infrastructure investments enabled increasingly ambitious research projects. The integration of research with education created learning environments that combined knowledge transmission with knowledge creation through collaborative investigation between students and faculty members. Advanced students participated in original research projects that contributed to their education while advancing scholarly understanding. Teaching responsibilities enabled experienced researchers to organize and communicate their knowledge while training future investigators. These educational research programs created synergistic relationships that enhanced both learning and discovery. Collaborative research networks brought together specialists from different institutions and geographical areas to tackle complex problems that exceeded individual capabilities while fostering professional relationships that enhanced future cooperation. Coordinated research programs enabled systematic investigation of related questions while avoiding unnecessary duplication of effort. Resource sharing arrangements provided access to specialized equipment and expertise. Joint funding initiatives supported ambitious projects that no single institution could afford. The preservation of research results through systematic archival procedures ensured that hard-won knowledge wouldn't be lost through accidents, institutional changes, or political upheavals, while maintaining accessibility for future generations. Libraries developed sophisticated cataloging systems that organize materials according to subject matter, chronological period, and level of complexity. Conservation techniques protected fragile materials from deterioration. Copying programs created multiple versions of important text to prevent loss. Quality assurance programs maintained excellence in research while enabling continuous improvement through systematic evaluation of methods and results. Regular audits assessed research procedures to identify potential problems before they compromised important findings. Standardized protocols ensured consistency across different research groups while maintaining flexibility for innovation. Peer review processes provided constructive feedback that enhanced research quality and reliability. The emergence of interdisciplinary approaches created new possibilities for addressing complex problems that required integration of knowledge from multiple fields of study, while fostering intellectual cross-pollination that generated unexpected insights and innovations. Collaborative teams brought together specialists with different types of expertise to tackle challenges that exceeded the capabilities of any single discipline. Cross-training programs enabled researchers to understand methods and perspectives from related fields. Research planning methodologies enabled investigators to design studies that could produce reliable results while making efficient use of available resources and avoiding common pitfalls that might compromise research outcomes. Project management techniques coordinated complex investigations involving multiple participants and extended time periods. Risk assessment procedures identified potential problems before they could interfere with research objectives. Timeline development ensured that projects remained on schedule while maintaining quality standards. The development of research evaluation metrics provided systematic methods for assessing research productivity and impact while guiding resource allocation decisions and career advancement policies. Publication counts measured scholarly output, while citation analysis revealed influence and importance of different contributions. Patent applications indicated practical applications of research findings, while technology adoption rates demonstrated real-world impact. These evaluation systems provided objective measures of research effectiveness. International cooperation agreements created frameworks for collaborative investigation that transcended political boundaries while respecting sovereignty and cultural differences among participating communities. Treaty arrangements established procedures for sharing research costs and benefits while protecting intellectual property rights. Exchange programs facilitated personnel movement while ensuring that all participants benefited from collaborative activities. Diplomatic protocols prevented conflicts that might disrupt important research relationships. The sophistication of knowledge management systems that emerged in ancient Sumer created intellectual capabilities that enabled continuous accumulation and refinement of understanding across generations of scholars while maintaining accessibility and relevance for practical applications. These achievements in systematic thinking, careful observation, and collaborative investigation establish methodological foundations that continue to influence human approaches to learning and discovery thousands of years after their original development in the world's first urban civilization. The twilight years of Sumerian dominance witnessed a gradual transformation that would reshape the entire ancient world as new powers emerged from the periphery to challenge the established order while absorbing and adapting the accumulated wisdom of millennia. The rise of Akkadian speakers from the northern regions marked not an abrupt conquest, but a complex process of cultural integration that preserved essential Sumerian achievements while introducing fresh perspectives and organizational approaches that would carry civilization forward into new eras of development. Sargon of Akkad, whose very name means legitimate king, emerged from obscurity around 2334 BCE to forge the world's first multi-ethnic empire through a combination of military innovation, diplomatic practices, and strategic planning. Sargon of Akkad, whose very name means legitimate king, emerged from obscurity around 2334 BCE to forge the world's first multi-ethnic empire through a combination of military innovation, and cultural sensitivity that enabled diverse peoples to cooperate under unified leadership. His armies employed bronze weapons and composite bows that gave them tactical advantages over traditional Sumerian forces, but his lasting success depended on his ability to integrate conquered territories through policies that respected local traditions while imposing imperial coordination. The Akkadian language gradually became the lingua franca of international diplomacy and commerce throughout Mesopotamia and beyond, spreading Sumerian cultural concepts to regions that had never experienced direct Sumerian political control. Akkadian scribes adapted cuneiform writing to their Semitic language while preserving Sumerian as a sacred and scholarly tongue, creating a bilingual intellectual culture that maintained continuity with earlier traditions while enabling communication across vast geographical and cultural distances. Imperial administration reached new levels of sophistication as Akkadian rulers managed territories stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea through bureaucratic systems that combined centralized coordination with local autonomy. Provincial governors maintained imperial authority while adapting policies to regional conditions and cultural preferences. Standardized legal codes provided consistent frameworks for justice while allowing flexibility in their application to different communities and circumstances. Trade networks expanded dramatically under imperial protection, as merchants could travel safely across vast distances under unified political authority. Commercial law evolved to handle increasingly complex transactions involving multiple currencies, diverse legal traditions, and long-distance credit arrangements that required sophisticated understanding of risk management and international relations. These expanded economic relationships spread technological innovations and cultural practices throughout the known world. Military technology continued to advance as imperial armies faced diverse enemies requiring different tactical approaches and specialized equipment. Siege engines enabled the conquest of heavily fortified cities, while cavalry units provided mobility for rapid campaigns across varied terrain. Professional officer corps developed strategic doctrines that could be adapted to different geographical and political circumstances, while maintaining unit cohesion and discipline across culturally diverse military formations. Architectural achievements reached unprecedented scales, as imperial resources enabled construction projects that dwarfed earlier accomplishments. Palace complexes covered vast areas with elaborate courtyards, reception halls, and residential quarters that demonstrated imperial power, while providing functional spaces for administrative and ceremonial activities. Garden systems created artificial landscapes that showcased engineering capabilities, while providing pleasant environments for imperial courts. The integration of diverse religious traditions created syncretic theological systems that maintained local identities while establishing imperial legitimacy through claims of divine mandate. Akkadian rulers presented themselves as chosen representatives of traditional Mesopotamian deities, while incorporating foreign gods into imperial pantheons that reflected the multi-ethnic character of their domains. These religious policies balanced respect for established traditions with the need for unified imperial identity. Educational systems expanded to serve imperial administrative needs while preserving and transmitting accumulated cultural knowledge to new generations. Scribal schools in major cities trained students from throughout the empire in languages, mathematics, law, and administration that prepared them for careers in imperial service. Advanced curricula included instruction in multiple languages and cultural traditions that enabled effective communication across ethnic and regional boundaries. Legal traditions evolved to accommodate the diverse customs and practices of imperial subjects, while maintaining unified standards for commercial and administrative activities. Local courts handled matters involving traditional community law, while imperial tribunals addressed disputes involving subjects from different regions or conflicts with imperial interests. These parallel legal systems balanced respect for local autonomy with the need for imperial coordination and authority. Cultural exchange flourished under imperial protection as artists, scholars, and craftsmen traveled throughout the empire sharing techniques and ideas that enriched local traditions while creating new synthetic forms. Artistic styles combined elements from different regions to produce distinctive imperial aesthetics that reflected cultural diversity while expressing unified political identity. Literary traditions incorporated foreign themes and narrative techniques that expanded the range of cultural expression. Technological diffusion accelerated as imperial communication networks facilitated the rapid spread of innovations across vast geographical areas. Agricultural techniques developed in one region could be quickly adapted to similar environments elsewhere within the empire. Manufacturing processes spread from specialized production centers to provincial workshops that could serve local markets while contributing to imperial economic integration. The preservation of Sumerian intellectual achievements became an imperial priority, as Akkadian rulers recognized the value of accumulated knowledge for effective governance and cultural prestige. Royal libraries collected and copied Sumerian texts while commissioning new works that applied traditional wisdom to contemporary challenges. Scholarly traditions maintained continuity with earlier periods while adapting to changing political and social circumstances. Imperial collapse, when it came, resulted from a combination of internal pressures and external threats that overwhelmed even sophisticated administrative systems. Climate change created agricultural crises that reduced imperial revenues while increasing demands for emergency assistance. Political fragmentation emerged as regional governors asserted independence from weakened central authority. Invasions by nomadic peoples exploited imperial weaknesses while introducing new military technologies and political organizations. The period of fragmentation that followed imperial collapse witnessed remarkable cultural creativity as competing city-states and regional kingdoms sought to distinguish themselves through architectural, artistic, and intellectual achievements that surpassed their predecessors. The Third Dynasty of Ur represented a conscious attempt to revive Sumerian glory through massive construction projects, legal codification, and administrative reforms that created the most thoroughly documented bureaucracy in ancient history. Neo-Sumerian administrative records provide unprecedented insight into how complex societies managed resources, coordinated activities, and maintained social order through systematic record-keeping and bureaucratic procedures. Monthly reports from provincial administrators detailed agricultural production, manufacturing output, trade activities, and population statistics that enabled central planning and resource allocation. These documents reveal the extraordinary complexity of urban civilization and the sophisticated management techniques required to sustain large populations. The famous Code of Ur-Nammu represented humanity's first systematic attempt to create comprehensive legal frameworks based on principles of proportional justice and compensation rather than arbitrary punishment. These laws addressed commercial disputes, property rights, family relationships, and criminal behavior through carefully reasoned procedures that balanced individual rights with community welfare. The legal precedents established during this period influenced jurisprudence throughout the ancient world. Mathematical and astronomical achievements reached new heights during the Neo-Sumerian period, as scholar priests refined computational techniques and observational methods that enabled unprecedented precision in calendar calculations and architectural planning. Their mathematical texts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of algebraic relationships, geometric principles, and numerical systems that wouldn't be surpassed for centuries. Astronomical observations provided the foundation for astrological systems that influenced decision-making throughout Mesopotamian society. Literary accomplishments during this period included some of humanity's greatest epic compositions, including refined versions of the Gilgamesh story that explored universal themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning through psychologically complex characters whose struggles resonate across millennia. These works weren't merely entertainment, but sophisticated philosophical explorations that used narrative techniques to examine fundamental questions about human nature and purpose. The final decline of Sumerian political independence came not through sudden conquest, but gradual absorption into larger imperial systems that preserved Sumerian cultural achievements while adapting them to serve new political and social needs. Babylonian rulers presented themselves as legitimate successors to ancient Sumerian kings, while incorporating Sumerian religious traditions, legal principles, and administrative techniques into their own governmental systems. Cultural transmission continued through educational institutions that maintained Sumerian language and literature as essential elements of scholarly training throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Students continued to study Sumerian texts for their literary merit, historical importance, and practical wisdom long after Sumerian had ceased to be a spoken language. These educational traditions preserved essential elements of human civilization's first urban culture for thousands of years. The influence of Sumerian innovations extended far beyond Mesopotamia through trade networks, diplomatic contacts, and cultural exchange that carried fundamental concepts about writing, mathematics, law, and social organization to societies throughout the ancient world. Egyptian scribes adapted cuneiform principles for their own writing system, while incorporating Mesopotamian mathematical techniques into their architectural and engineering projects. Indus Valley civilizations developed their own writing systems and urban planning concepts that showed clear influence from Mesopotamian precedents, while adapting these ideas to local conditions and cultural preferences. The spread of metallurgical techniques, agricultural methods, and craft specializations created technological foundations that enabled the development of complex societies throughout Asia and Europe. The enduring legacy of Sumerian civilization lies not in any single achievement, but in the fundamental transformation of human society, from small-scale tribal organizations to complex urban civilizations, capable of supporting large populations through specialized economic activities, sophisticated governance systems, and accumulated cultural knowledge that could be transmitted across generations and adapted to changing circumstances. Their development of writing systems enabled the preservation and transmission of complex information that made possible all subsequent advances in science, literature, law, and administration. Mathematical innovations provided computational tools that enabled architectural achievements, astronomical observations, and commercial calculations that supported urban life. Legal concepts established principles of justice and social organization that continue to influence governance systems throughout the modern world. Perhaps most importantly, Sumerian civilization demonstrated that humans could consciously shape their social and physical environments through cooperative effort, systematic planning, and accumulated knowledge, rather than simply accepting whatever conditions nature provided. Their cities represented deliberate attempts to create better living conditions through human ingenuity and organization. Their institutions showed how large numbers of people could cooperate effectively despite diverse backgrounds and competing interests. The agricultural techniques they developed enabled reliable food production that supported population densities far exceeding what hunting and gathering could sustain. Their irrigation systems transformed arid landscapes into productive farmland, while their water management projects provided flood protection and reliable transportation networks. These environmental modifications required unprecedented levels of social cooperation and technical expertise. Religious innovations created conceptual frameworks that help people understand their relationships to natural phenomena, social obligations, and ultimate questions about meaning and purpose. Sumerian mythology provided narrative structures that explained the origins of the world and humanity's place within it, while establishing moral principles that guided individual behavior and social relationships. Educational systems ensured that accumulated knowledge and cultural values could be transmitted to new generations while enabling continuous refinement and expansion of human understanding. Their schools created literate populations capable of managing complex administrative tasks, while preserving literary and scholarly traditions that enriched cultural life. The artistic achievements of Sumerian civilization established aesthetic principles and creative techniques that influenced artistic development throughout the ancient world. Their sculptures, paintings, musical compositions, and architectural designs demonstrated that human creativity could produce beauty and meaning that transcended mere functional necessity. As sleep deepens and carries you toward peaceful rest, let your mind hold on to this remarkable truth. Everything we recognize as civilization began with those first brave souls who chose to plant seeds and stay to tend them. The Sumerians gave us not just cities and laws and writing, but the profound understanding that humans could shape their destiny through cooperation, wisdom, and unwavering determination. Their legacy flows through every word we write, every law we follow, every dream we dare to pursue. Rest now, knowing that their extraordinary journey became the foundation of our own.